The house had learned how to hold silence over the years, and on that afternoon it did so carefully, as if it knew something important was about to happen. Margaret stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing a cup she had already cleaned once, watching the pale autumn light slip through the window and rest on the old wooden table. The table had scratches from decades of meals, homework, and long talks, but today it felt different, almost alert. Ethan sat there, her grandson, tall for his age but folded inward, shoulders slightly bent, hands wrapped tightly around a mug that had gone cold. He had asked to come over after school, his voice on the phone polite but strained, and Margaret had felt a quiet worry settle in her chest the moment she heard it. Now, with only the ticking clock and the hum of the refrigerator filling the room, she sensed that he was holding something heavy inside him. She turned off the faucet and dried her hands slowly, giving him time, because she had learned that rushing words could make them disappear. Ethan stared at the table, his eyes fixed on a small dark mark in the wood, as if it were the safest place to look. Outside, a car drove past, and a distant dog barked, ordinary sounds that made the moment feel even more fragile. Margaret pulled out the chair across from him and sat down, meeting his silence with patience rather than questions. He shifted in his seat, took a breath, then let it out like he had been holding it for too long. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and careful, almost afraid of being too loud in the room that had watched him grow up. "Grandma, can I tell you something?" he asked, not looking up. Margaret nodded, her face calm, though her heart tightened with a familiar feeling she hadn't felt in years, the sense that someone was about to trust her with something tender. Ethan swallowed and rubbed his thumb along the edge of the mug. "I don't know how to say it," he continued, words coming out unevenly, "but I feel different lately." He paused again, and Margaret noticed how young he suddenly looked, not the nearly grown teenager others saw, but the boy who once held her hand crossing the street. She leaned forward slightly, her voice soft but steady. "You can take your time," she said. The permission seemed to help. Ethan nodded, breathing a little easier, then spoke faster, as if afraid he might lose courage if he stopped. He talked about school feeling louder than usual, about friends who joked and laughed while he felt like he was standing behind glass, watching. He talked about a girl he liked, though he never said her name, only that she smiled kindly and listened when he spoke, and how he never found the right moment to tell her what she meant to him. As he spoke, his hands tightened around the mug, knuckles pale, his words spilling out with a mix of urgency and restraint. He said she was moving away soon, that everyone else seemed excited for her, but he felt like something inside him was slipping away. "It feels like I missed my chance," he admitted quietly, finally lifting his eyes to Margaret's. There was no drama in his face, just a deep, honest sadness that surprised her with its weight. Margaret felt a sharp pull in her chest, not from fear, but recognition. She had sat at that same table once, decades earlier, feeling the same ache of unsaid words and wondering if love was something you could lose before you ever touched it. She kept her expression gentle, knowing that what he needed was not answers, but understanding. Ethan continued, his voice steady but thin, saying he thought feelings were supposed to make life brighter, not heavier, and that he didn't know what to do with the ache that followed him home every day. Margaret reached her hand across the table, stopping just short of touching his, giving him the choice, and he rested his fingers against hers without looking down. The contact was small but meaningful, grounding them both. She told him, in simple words, that feelings did not arrive to make life easy, that sometimes they came to show us how deeply we were capable of caring. Ethan listened closely, as if holding on to each word. The room seemed to lean inward, the light dimming slightly as clouds passed outside, and Margaret realized this moment would stay with her long after the day ended. Ethan asked if the hurt ever went away, and she paused, not wanting to lie, not wanting to frighten him either. She told him the pain changes, that it softens and teaches, and that it leaves behind a quiet strength if you let it. He nodded slowly, absorbing this, though his eyes still held doubt, and Margaret knew this was only the beginning for him. As the clock ticked on and the light shifted across the table, she understood that this was not just a talk between a grandmother and her grandson, but the passing of something deeper, a shared understanding of love, loss, and the courage it takes to feel both, and even before the conversation ended, she sensed that his quiet words at the kitchen table would echo inside her for a long time to come. Ethan stayed at the kitchen table, his hand still gripping the mug, eyes fixed on the scratches in the wood as if they could hold his secrets safely, and finally, after a long pause that seemed to stretch the room around them, he spoke again, voice trembling slightly but determined. "I think something's wrong with me," he admitted, the words small but heavy, carrying all the confusion of a young heart trying to understand feelings it had never faced before. Margaret's heart tightened at the admission, not because he was wrong, but because she recognized the weight of unspoken emotions that could feel like they would crush you from the inside. She leaned forward, resting her forearms lightly on the table, her eyes calm, her voice soft and patient. "Nothing's wrong with you, Ethan. Just tell me what's on your mind." And then he did, in a rush and a stumble, the words spilling out as though they had been bottled up for months. He liked someone, more than a friend, more than he had ever admitted even to himself, and now she was moving away, leaving him feeling hollow, as though a part of him had been stolen without permission. His voice cracked slightly, the kind of voice that makes grown-ups catch their breath, because it is honest in the rawest sense, unguarded, exposing the vulnerability that only comes from trust. Margaret listened without interruption, letting each word land in the quiet kitchen, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the floor, making the moment feel suspended outside of time. She remembered what it felt like to be that age, when emotions seemed bigger than the world, when a simple glance or a few words could change everything, and she felt the ache of recognition deep in her chest. Ethan's confession was not just about a girl or a lost opportunity, it was about the first real confrontation with heartbreak, the realization that feelings could hurt more than they could heal when circumstances were beyond your control. He spoke of confusion, of the unfairness of timing, of how everyone else seemed to carry on, laughing, joking, living, while he felt trapped in a small, silent world of longing and regret. Margaret reached out slowly, just resting her hand near his on the table, close enough to offer warmth and presence without intruding, and Ethan, after a moment, allowed his fingers to brush hers lightly, seeking the comfort of connection even as he struggled to find words for his own emotions. Margaret spoke softly, her voice a gentle anchor, reminding him that feelings are never wrong, even when they hurt, and that the ache he carried was proof of his capacity to care deeply, to love honestly, and to feel fully. She told him that life often teaches through pain, that experiences like this shape who we become, and that the heartbreak of missed opportunities, though bitter, could teach him about courage, honesty, and the value of expressing his emotions before it is too late. Ethan listened, nodding slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction, as if her words had carved a small space for hope in the heavy weight pressing on him. He admitted he didn't know why feelings sometimes brought sadness instead of joy, and Margaret smiled faintly, recognizing the timeless question in his young eyes, the question that countless hearts have asked across generations. She explained that emotions are complicated, that love is rarely simple or convenient, and that the lessons it brings are as important as the happiness it promises, emphasizing that even sorrow carries meaning if one is willing to learn from it. As Ethan spoke, a shift occurred in the room, a soft easing of heaviness, a quiet acknowledgement that sharing pain diminishes it, that speaking the truth aloud can be a balm even when no solution exists yet. Margaret's words were gentle but firm, offering guidance without judgment, and Ethan began to relax, his expression softening, the earlier tension replaced by a tentative understanding that he was not alone, that his feelings were valid, and that someone who loved him could sit with him through this moment without trying to fix it immediately. The kitchen, once merely a place of routine, now felt sacred, a safe haven for the first honest exploration of young love, heartbreak, and vulnerability, the kind of conversation that lingers and shapes the heart in ways small and profound. Ethan's eyes, previously downcast, lifted toward Margaret as he asked the quiet, tremulous question that weighed on him, "Does it ever stop hurting?" Margaret hesitated, recognizing that the truth was nuanced, that pain doesn't vanish but transforms, softens, becomes part of life's rhythm, leaving traces that shape character and deepen empathy. She spoke with care, explaining that while the intensity of sorrow fades, the lessons and memories remain, enriching life if one embraces them. Ethan nodded, not fully reassured, but comforted by the honesty and by the shared experience of someone who had once felt similarly and survived. someone who could understand without dismissing or minimizing the depth of his emotions. As the afternoon waned, sunlight fading into gentle shadows, they continued to sit together, the room holding the echoes of his words, her guidance, and the quiet connection forming between them, a connection that bridged generations, a moment of emotional intimacy free of judgment or rush, where understanding and trust blossomed, leaving Ethan with the beginnings of healing and Margaret with the vivid reminder that the hearts of the young carry the same depth and vulnerability she had once known, and that witnessing their first encounters with love and pain can stir even the most seasoned hearts with the echoes of their own past. In that kitchen, with the fading light painting the walls, Margaret realized that this conversation was more than just a moment of sharing, it was a tender imprint, a memory that would remain with both of them, shaping the way Ethan would approach his feelings in the future and reminding her that love, in its many forms, never truly leaves us, instead living on quietly in words exchanged, hands brushed, and hearts open to understanding. That night, after Ethan had left, Margaret found herself back at the kitchen table, the quiet of the house wrapping around her like a familiar shawl, and she realized the emptiness she felt wasn't loneliness but the weight of memories and emotions that had been stirred by her grandson's words. The same table that had held Ethan's small, trembling confession now seemed alive with echoes of her own past, the nervous excitement of young love, the heartbreak of missed chances, the ache of longing that had once kept her awake for nights that felt endless. She ran her fingers along the worn wood, remembering sitting there decades earlier, waiting for Thomas to arrive, her heart pounding with both hope and fear, wondering if she was brave enough to speak honestly and risk the possibility of rejection. As she traced the scratches and grooves, she realized that time had not diminished her capacity to feel, only refined it, giving depth to the lessons love had taught her over the years. Ethan's struggle had reopened doors in her heart she hadn't thought to open, reminding her that emotions don't retire with age, they simply take new shapes and find new ways to surface, often in the unexpected voices of those we nurture and care for. She thought about the courage it took for him to speak, how the vulnerability in his words mirrored her own youthful admissions, and how, despite the years and experiences that had shaped her, she could still connect deeply with the rawness of first heartbreak. Margaret felt a tender ache, a mixture of nostalgia and newfound awareness, realizing that these moments of intergenerational sharing were precious, teaching both the young and the old about resilience, empathy, and the enduring power of love. She considered the way emotions could travel across time, from her memories to Ethan's present, creating an invisible thread between them that bound them together more tightly than she had ever anticipated. Sitting in the dimming light, she acknowledged that love was never confined to romantic gestures alone, it lived in understanding, patience, and presence, in quiet conversations that allowed hearts to be seen and heard without judgment. She thought about how, in guiding Ethan through his own feelings, she was revisiting her own, reflecting on her mistakes, her regrets, and her triumphs, and finding that in helping him, she was also comforting herself. The room smelled faintly of brewed tea and the lingering warmth of the day, a scent that seemed to anchor her in the present while memories swept through her mind like gentle waves. She whispered softly into the emptiness, "It's okay to feel," as if saying it aloud could solidify the lessons of the afternoon, cementing the truth that vulnerability was not weakness but a sign of strength. Margaret realized that even though Ethan had come seeking solace, he had unwittingly reminded her of her own capacity for deep feeling, for noticing the subtleties of love, loss, and connection that others might overlook. Her heart swelled with gratitude for the chance to witness his first steps into emotional honesty, understanding that these small, tender moments often leave the most lasting marks on the soul. She reflected on the way life circles back, how the experiences of youth echo into later years, and how love, in its many forms, romantic, familial, compassionate, never truly fades but continues to ripple outward, influencing and shaping the way we see and feel the world. As the night deepened and shadows grew longer across the floorboards, Margaret sat in quiet contemplation, feeling an unexpected lightness mingled with her lingering ache, knowing that the conversation with Ethan had not only offered him guidance but had reignited her own awareness of emotional depth, the beauty of first heartbreak, and the enduring warmth of connection. She realized that these lessons were timeless, not bound by age, and that by witnessing his vulnerability, she had been reminded of the courage it takes to feel, to love, and to share honestly, even when it hurts. The kitchen table, now bathed in the soft glow of the lamp, felt sacred, a silent witness to the intertwining of past and present, teaching her once again that emotions are meant to be experienced fully, absorbed, and carried forward, shaping the person we become. Margaret understood that Ethan's quiet revelation had opened a mirror to her own heart, allowing her to reconnect with the tender, unguarded part of herself that still longed, still remembered, and still held the capacity for profound feeling. She realized that love is not a fleeting moment but a thread that runs through life, connecting generations, allowing wisdom and empathy to pass along in ways words alone cannot capture, and that these quiet, honest conversations leave a mark far deeper than any fleeting happiness or sorrow. As she sat there, alone but not lonely, she felt a gentle stirring of hope and warmth. A reminder that even in the face of heartache, whether old or new, there is always a chance to recognize beauty, to feel deeply, and to hold on to the lessons that pain and love alike leave behind, understanding that some conversations echo in the heart long after they are spoken, shaping us, guiding us, and reminding us that connection, trust, and honesty are the truest forms of love we can give and receive. A week later, Ethan returned to Margaret's house, walking through the familiar front door. With a cautious smile, carrying the same quiet nervousness but a subtle shift in his demeanor, as if the conversation from the previous week had begun to settle inside him, giving him a small measure of courage and clarity. He approached the kitchen table, and Margaret noticed the way his eyes flicked around the room before finally resting on her, the soft warmth in his gaze reflecting both trust and gratitude. He sat down across from her, this time without the tight grip on the mug, his hands resting lightly on the table, signaling a tentative ease. "I still feel sad," he admitted, voice calm but tinged with lingering melancholy, "but not as broken as before." Margaret's lips curved into a gentle smile, understanding the significance of his words. It was the beginning of acceptance, a small yet profound step toward healing. She nodded encouragingly, her own heart swelling with quiet pride, realizing how much bravery it takes for a young person to confront emotional pain and allow themselves to be vulnerable, even in the presence of someone they trust completely. Ethan shifted slightly in his chair, and after a brief pause, he rose to leave, hesitating at the door, a gesture that held the weight of unspoken thoughts. Then, in a voice that carried both sincerity and a hint of youthful awkwardness, he said, "Grandma, I'm glad it was you I talked to." Margaret felt a warmth spread through her chest, an emotional resonance that reminded her why she cherished these moments, why the sharing of hearts across generations was one of life's most tender gifts. "So am I," she replied softly, her words carrying the depth of understanding, empathy, and love that only comes from someone who has lived, felt, and endured enough to recognize the importance of trust and honesty. As Ethan closed the door behind him, Margaret returned to the kitchen table, sitting alone yet profoundly aware of the presence he had left behind, not in the physical sense, but in the quiet energy of connection, understanding, and emotional intimacy that lingered in the air. She traced her fingers along the worn wood, reflecting on the week's conversation, on the courage it took for him to open his heart, and on the subtle shifts she had witnessed, knowing that these moments of honest dialogue were not fleeting but enduring, leaving impressions that would continue to shape both of their lives. The chair across from her, though empty, felt alive with the memory of shared vulnerability, a testament to the power of listening, patience, and love that doesn't demand but simply allows space for truth to emerge. Margaret considered how rare and beautiful it was for a young person to speak their deepest emotions without fear of judgment, and how her role in this had been both simple and profound, to provide a safe harbor where words could land gently, where hearts could be understood, and where the echoes of sorrow could transform into lessons of resilience and hope. She thought about the continuity of life, how experiences, emotions, and love pass quietly between generations, shaping character, empathy, and the capacity to feel deeply, and how moments like this, though seemingly ordinary, carry extraordinary weight in the unfolding of human connection. The kitchen, now bathed in the soft evening light filtering through the windows, seemed to breathe with the memory of Ethan's words, each shadow and glimmer of light reminding her that love manifests not only in grand gestures but in quiet honesty, in the willingness to sit together with pain, and in the courage to allow another person to be fully seen. Margaret reflected on the journey of the week, the hesitancy, the confession, the guidance, and now the tentative healing, and understood that these interactions are what build emotional strength, teaching both young and old that love, trust, and understanding are ongoing practices rather than finite achievements. She remembered her own life, her own moments of first heartbreak, first love, and first confessions, recognizing the parallels between her experiences and Ethan's, and feeling a renewed appreciation for the timelessness of human emotion and the lessons it imparts. As she sat quietly, the stillness of the evening wrapping around her, she realized that Ethan's words, simple yet profound, had left an imprint on her heart, reminding her that connection and emotional honesty are gifts that transcend age and circumstance. The echoes of their shared conversation lingered, a gentle hum of warmth, reflection, and unspoken love, affirming that some exchanges, though brief, have the power to change perspectives, heal quietly, and create bonds that remain long after the physical presence fades. Margaret understood now that healing is gradual, that the heart learns in its own time, and that guiding someone through their emotions is not about fixing but about witnessing, supporting, and allowing space for growth. She felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that Ethan had taken his first steps toward processing his feelings, that he had experienced both the vulnerability of confession and the comfort of being understood, and that he would carry these lessons forward into the world, stronger and more aware of his own capacity to feel deeply and authentically. Sitting alone, Margaret let herself breathe, appreciating the continuity of care and empathy that connects generations, the subtle beauty of shared vulnerability, and the way one conversation can ripple through time, leaving traces of love, understanding, and quiet strength. The kitchen table, with its scratches, light, and memory, now felt like a sacred witness to the enduring human experience, of first heartbreak, of learning to face feelings, and of the profound impact of simply being present for one another. She realized that Ethan's quiet words would echo within her always, not as sadness, but as a gentle reminder that love, patience, and connection are timeless, that the hearts of the young and the hearts of the old can meet in moments of honesty, and that the smallest gestures, a hand resting near another, a kind word, a listening ear, can create the most lasting and meaningful impressions on the soul. As evening deepened into night, Margaret sat there in the warm glow of reflection, understanding that some moments never truly end, that their lessons live on quietly in memory, and that love, in all its forms, continues to move through us, shaping the way we see, feel, and connect with the world, leaving a legacy far richer than any fleeting happiness or sorrow.